Royce Duplessis, a Democrat in Louisiana, has proposed legislation for this regular session. And that legislation, I'm not going to read the whole thing. I am going to read a little bit of it just to kind of show what it is that this legislation is doing. So, what is the legislation doing? This legislation. Present law provides relative to post-conviction relief. Present law provides that the petitioner is in custody after a sentence for conviction of a offense, that relief will be granted only on the following grounds. Conviction was in violation of the Constitution, court exceeded jurisdiction, blah, 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 blah. A proposed law retains present law and makes a conviction obtained by a non-unanimous jury verdict ground for post-conviction relief. So, why is this needed? Ramos versus Louisiana is a Supreme Court ruling that basically overturned the convictions of people who were convicted on a 10-2 basis. So some states like Louisiana had 10-2, you could lock somebody up. The Supreme Court said, no, you can't, because your right to a jury trial requires all 12 jurors to say that you're guilty. So anybody who has a 10-2 conviction should at least have their trial reheard. But they're not doing that except in Orleans Parish. They're not doing that in the rest of the state. So Royce Duplessis, and shockingly it made it out of committee because there were a handful of Republicans who supported this bill and got it out of committee. And I was listening to a different conservative talk show in the afternoon or in the midday time period who was complaining, and his guest was complaining about this bill that would release people who had a 10-2 conviction. Well, if the Supreme Court has already said that 10-2 convictions violate the Constitution, then why haven't we retried these people or let them go? Because we don't like to follow the rules, right? But there's a reason why I'm bringing this particular thing up. Because in this legislation that is trying to deal with the fact that we had a Supreme Court verdict, Ramos versus Louisiana, in Ramos versus Louisiana, you had a dissent. That dissent was written by your and my least favorite Supreme Court Justice, Samuel Alito. Samuel Alito wrote a dissent. Now, shockingly, the Chief Justice also joined with him in all of it, and weirdly enough, Justice Kagan also joined in all but Part 3D, dissenting. I don't know what problem Kagan had here. I'm not going to delve into that part. Stop clocks are right twice a day. I wonder about, clocks being wrong every once in a while, too. Sometimes you have to reset the clock, right? So let's look at what he said. Justice Alito, along with Chief Justice, joins with Justice Kagan, blah, blah, blah. The doctrine of stare decisis gets rough treatment in today's decision. Lowering the bar for overruling our precedents, a badly fractured majority casts aside an important and long-established decision with little regard for the enormous reliance the decision has engendered. If the majority's approach is not a way to dispose of this one case, the decision marks an important turn. He talks about Apodaca v. Oregon and why we should be following stare decisis. In Part 3, he just explains why stare decisis supports retention of the precedent. And then we scan down to the next example of, no, it cannot. The idea that Apodaca was a phantom precedent defies belief, and it certainly deserves important objectives that stare decisis exists to promote, including even-handedness, predictability, and protection of legitimate reliance. For all these reasons, Apodaca clearly was a precedent, and if the court wishes to be done with it, it must explain why overruling Apodaca is consistent with the doctrine of stare decisis. Stare decisis has been a fundamental part of our jurisprudence since the founding, and it is an important doctrine. You fucking hypocrite. Where was all that thinking with Dobbs v. Jackson? Where was all that thinking with the importance of stare decisis? Now, he does say, as all jurists up there will say, that there are cases where stare decisis should be ignored, and there are clear examples of that. Brown versus Board of Education. That was a example of ignoring previous precedent, getting rid of separate but equal. So there's that. That being said, for somebody who is just standing on how important stare decisis is, it's so important to have stare decisis. You have to uphold judicial precedent because you have to keep in regards, what are the three words he said again? Even-handedness, predictability, and the protection of legitimate reliance. Where did that come into place with Dobbs v. Jackson and the overturning of not only Roe versus Wade, but Casey versus Planned Parenthood? Huh? Hypocrisy is a conservative prerequisite. And one of the reasons that Justice Alito is one of the crappiest justices of all times includes the fact that he is an extreme hypocrite who will give lip service to stare decisis when he doesn't agree with the opinion, but he doesn't give a rat's ass about stare decisis anywhere else. Meanwhile, we have conservatives in Louisiana who are fighting the fact that we should be letting these people who got 10-2 decisions either have their trials reheard or let them go. And they're not doing it, causing a need to have this legislation be put forward. This legislation should not have to even be necessary. We should be either retrying the people or letting them go if they were only convicted with a 10-2. Most of the times when you have a hung jury and you don't have a thing and you don't retry the case, you have a mistrial and the person never goes to prison. Or at least gets to leave prison after being locked up there for however long the trial took. These people should not be in prison. They should be either moved to a jail for a rehearing of their case, or they should be let go. If the prosecution didn't do a good enough job to get a unanimous jury verdict, and the Supreme Court tells you that you need a unanimous jury verdict to actually, convict someone of a felony, guess what? Follow the Supreme Court precedent. But we're not doing it here. I'm sure we're not doing it in other places as well. So what do you think? Do you believe that these people with 10-2 convictions should be stuck in prison, despite the fact that the Supreme Court says that those convictions are not constitutional under the requirements of jury trials in our Constitution? Or, do you think that we should actually be following the Supreme Court precedent and letting these people go, or giving them a rehearing of their cases to attempt to try and get the 12-vote majority that you would need to have to lock someone up under today's system? Leave your comments down below. Remember to like the video, share, subscribe to the channel. Of course, unless you're a Nazi, have a good day.